All right, we still have lots of people joining, but thank you everyone so much for joining Wing's monthly webinar series. This is Liftoff with Wing, Leadership and Action. And just a reminder, this is also a virtual networking opportunity. So at the end of the fireside chat, we'll break into breakout rooms and Torsten will hop around. So make sure you stick around at the end of the chat so that everybody can have a chance to network. And today we're welcoming Torsten Kolind. He's the co-founder of Underground Ventures for a fireside chat to discuss the power of investing in yourself. So, Torsten, could you please take a minute to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. Excited to join today. Co-founder of Underground Ventures, which, as it sounds like, is a venture firm specialized in geothermal technology and geothermal energy. And I'm sure we can talk more about that. My background is actually engineering, particularly biotech engineering. So not quite geothermal or geology or anything like that. But I also have spent 10 years in software in San Francisco, and a bunch of other things. So a little bit all over the place, and now in geothermal as of 2 years ago.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you for that background. So we'll just jump right into some questions here. What led you to focus your investments on geothermal technology and also on women's health? And how do you see these sectors influencing the future job market?
Yeah, maybe let's start there. Geothermal energy and women's health, not perhaps directly related, and not it's not sort of the same job. My job is to invest in geothermal energy, but I also act as an individual, what's called angel investor into the field of women's health. I have been a founder of a technology company in San Francisco, and have learned a lot about how that journey is of starting a company and fundraising and building a team and building a product and all this stuff. And so while I'm not a women's health expert, I do know a lot about the companies and fundraising, and I think that's mostly in that sort of personal capacity. And so the reason for women's health actually mostly is that a friend of mine started a women's health company in San Francisco, a really cool company that is doing using menstrual blood to allow for blood testing, essentially in a much easier, non-invasive way. Really cool device, essentially like an advanced menstrual pad that you take a little piece out of and send in to a lab after use, and then you get your results in an app. They just got FDA approval, and that whole journey has been really fascinating to follow. And so that led me to, the founder of that, a medical doctor, gave me a number of intros to other people in this field. And I just sort of ended up being both an advisor and an angel investor into a couple of these companies. We can talk much more about that. I think geothermal is, again, more in my professional capacity, and that interestingly, there is some overlap. There are some things that are similar. Geothermal energy, just like women's health, is an underserved market, which means that we have a lot of opportunity for innovation, a lot of opportunity for new technologies. A lot of people are working on really cool stuff, but from the sort of venture capital and investment point of view, there isn't really that much money going into it. And it's also both are industries where you have very technical people that are really specialists in their field. Women's health is often medical or engineering. And that, I think, from a startup and investment point of view, is always a challenge, because you have to move people from that technical area of expertise into what does it take to build a company and build a product. So there are some similarities, which I really enjoy, but they are separate, in terms of sort of professional activity.
Great. That's really interesting. I did not know about that the women's health company at all. That's really interesting and innovative. So very cool. So between these two sectors, how do you see them influencing the future job market?
Ooh, let's start with women's health. I think it's often from the sort of venture capital community referred to as a niche, and I think half of the populations healthcare is probably a bit bold to refer to as a niche. There is already a lot of money being spent in the field of women's health, and there are a lot of really cool new products and technologies that are happening. So I do think that there will be a lot of jobs, continue to be a lot of jobs, and a lot of job growth in that sector. There is a sort of, it's a little bit of a, in some ways, a breakout from traditional healthcare in the sense that's being specific to women's biology is not something we've been used to doing. It's essentially, we've just sort of lumped it together. There's even a term called the reference man, which is like how you medically have all sorts of standardized measurements. We haven't done clinical testing on women for clinical trials for more than about 25 years. So there's just so much data we don't have, and there's so much I think we are likely to see over the next 10, 20 years in the space. So definitely a growing market and job opportunity for sure. I think geothermal, which is probably where many people here on this call are more sort of more experienced than I am. I see it very much as there is traditional geothermal, hyperthermal, and sort of what we've been doing for 100 years. And then there is next generation, which you can define in different ways, different types and generations. We can get into that. But that next generation geothermal really has only been going on for a few years in terms of actual commercial rollout. So given the technical breakthroughs in this space, I absolutely expect a lot of jobs to be created, particularly for next gen geothermal. So jobs in both sectors for sure, and both should be really interesting to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. And given your background as an investor and as an angel investor in geothermal, but also in women's health, which sounds like it was kind of a pivot for you, for professionals who are aspiring to become investors or entrepreneurs, what kind of skills or experiences are essential for long-term success in these areas?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I think one question is how do you get into each of these areas? Another question is how do you become an investor into these areas? So they are again separate in that I am investing, both a bit of my own money and a bit of my own time into women's health, very, very early stage women's health companies. And I think you kind of have to start with a sort of an interest in the field and hopefully some experience that you can bring to the table. But I think it's important to remember that you do not have to be an expert in the field in order to be supportive, and in order to add value, and in order to be an investor. And I think venture capital investing is maybe we should talk a little bit about how that actually works, because it's very different from, let's say, if you go to the bank and you ask for a loan, or you put in some of your money into a company. Venture capital is this idea that you put money into a company where you expect it to be loss-making for quite a while. You're essentially expecting to burn a lot of money, but eventually, hopefully, to grow really, really big so that you can get your investment back in many-fold. However, most venture capital investors are investing in maybe 10 or 20 companies, and they really only expect one or a few of them to work out. So it's a type of high risk, high return investment where the statistical average for when you invest in a company is you are going to lose your money. And I think that for many people is sort of you have to wrap your head around that a little bit. Like, you go into a company and you statistically expect to lose your money. Like, how does that work out? But it does if you are really good at it, and I'd say a bit lucky, because you can have one or two really big hitters that could be the next Google or whatever, right? So just, it's important to remember that. When you act as an angel investor, it's really just sort of venture capital as an individual. You are choosing, to whatever savings you have, or however you have made a bit of money you don't need to pay rent with, you are choosing to put that into, let's say, a startup, as opposed to putting into the public traded market, buying stocks or mutual funds or other things. And I think for most angel investors, it's only a small part of their savings that they would put into startups, because it is a really high risk category. So I definitely think before you become an angel investor, you should be willing to lose the money that you invest. It's not the plan. You would like it to work out, but you need to, it cannot be your retirement savings. That is not a good idea. And that is investment advice. Everything else is not. Um, so that's just sort of, it's a small part of the assets that you have. And it's okay to not invest a lot of money in these companies. And if it's too little, the founders will tell you, hey, it's really kind that you're willing to invest, but like I can't really handle that sort of ticket size, if you will. So that's just like general topics around becoming an investor. If you want to be a venture capital investor, it's a little bit of a different game. Now you're doing this as a job. This is no longer to support startups and maybe hopefully be a part of a company that works out. Now this is your job, and you're going in and you're taking a portfolio approach to deploying a certain amount of capital into a certain very specific type of startups. And happy to talk more about how that works, but those are two very different things. So that's a start at least.
Great. Yeah, I think that's some really useful context too. So thank you for that. So for those who are interested into transitioning into more niche sectors like geothermal energy, do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I did it myself. So what happened with me coming into geothermal was that I have been working with another tech founder from another software company on essentially doing technology investments into the climate change space. So he has had essentially been a part of a company that went public on the New York Stock Exchange, and all three founders made a lot of money in that process. So he has a lot more capital available for these types of things than I do. So essentially he said, Torsten, why don't we do this together? He will put in some money into a pool that will say this is a sort of a fund, if you will, to invest in climate. And the two of us together will figure out how that's deployed. And we looked at a lot of different sectors. And one day he shows up with this super hot rock report from those of you that know Tara Rogers from the Clean Air Task Force and her team. They had done, a few years ago, the first sort of summary of where the super hot rock geothermal field is. And he had met Tara at an event. She gave him this PDF, and he came back and showed it to me. And I really had no starting point. I'd heard of heat pumps, but I had no starting point otherwise in terms of where is the geothermal market and how does it even work technically. So I didn't have much of an opinion first when he showed me this, but I thought it was exciting and interesting, and it sounded like something worth looking into. So we decided that I should spend a couple of weeks trying to educate myself a little bit. So I did. I came back, and I told him, look, this is actually very interesting. Like there is something here. It's underserved. Again, there's a lot of parallels to my experience with women's health. It's underserved. It's sort of fundamentally scientifically good, but the venture capital community hasn't understood it yet. This is something that perhaps is a good fit for where this pool of money should go. And remember, he cares about climate change, and he wants to optimize this pool of money to have an impact on climate change. That's really number one. He would like to also make some good investments financially, but the number one thing is how do we deploy these funds so that we have an impact on climate change. So I came back and said, I think this is actually a really, really good way of doing that. Geothermal, particularly next gen geothermal. Fervo just had their announcement about the 3.6 megawatt flow rate. So this was like mid last year or so. We talked to a bunch of different people. I read a bunch of papers, and we constructed what I would call a fund thesis. We essentially said, okay, if we are to deploy money into this space to technology heavy companies, what does one do? Because so I should probably mention that Underground Ventures total budget for investment is $40 million. And while that sounds like a lot of money, you can go out and do one project, drill, and do one power plant or geothermal heating plant and blow $40 million. So it's actually not very much money when you are in the field. So we had to be really clever about if that is the money we have. Yes, it's a lot, but on the other hand, we need to be very smart about how we use it. So we decided that the right fit for that was to go into very early stage startups that have new products and technologies that can move the market forward for everybody. So instead of going into, let's say, invest in Fervo or invest in a company that is out there drilling, we decided to look for companies that have tools that other people can use to lower the risk or lower the cost of their deployments. So the first investment we did is a company called GA Drilling. They're mostly known for their plasma drilling tools, but they actually have something that's very cool called AnchorBit, which is a much more current product, which is stabilizing the drill string downhole, particularly for horizontal drilling. So if you're able to stabilize your drill string, you can drill a lot further horizontally and have a lot less wear on your drill bits. So that's an example of a company that we are hoping can help a lot of other people lower the cost and risk of their geothermal ventures. We also did another company called Canopus Drilling, which is doing steel shot drilling, particle drilling. And then the third one is not announced yet, but is in the high temperature downhole tools, electronics space. So they're very particular, very technical. And it's just to wrap all of this up as a sort of a venture capital thesis. The idea is to go in and place, let's say, 7 to 10 bets, let's call it that, in different companies, to the tune of $500,000 to maybe $2 million into these companies, and thereby have quite a bit of money left to follow those that do really well, that need to raise another round of funding. We would still have money in the pool that we could go in and support them further. So that's what we're doing and have been doing since the beginning of this year. And I feel really good about that. That means we say no to a lot of stuff. We say no to a lot of people doing projects and a lot of other interesting things. So it's just in the name of focus and deploying our money in the best and most impactful way we can think of.
And given that you have to be really selective and really picky, especially in the current landscape where innovation is so rapid and there's so many new technologies coming out, what are some things that professionals can do to remain relevant and continually add to their industry?
Question. I think personal development is always a good idea. Investing in yourself is always worth it. You can do it in a lot of different ways. You can look within the specific field. You can try to educate yourself of what's happening that you don't know about. But you can also develop in things that have nothing to do with the field. You could learn certain skills like, presentation skills or negotiation or, investments like what I'm doing. And you can do completely different things. But I think specific to geothermal, it's interesting. People get very quickly sort of pigeonholed in their specific line of work. So if you are, for instance, if you are a specialist in drilling, that's what you know about. You have opinions about a lot of different drilling technologies, and you may have a lot of experience. You might have oil and gas experience. And the minute you leave that, people are often not at all up to date about what's happening in the field. They have misconceptions about the fact that, for instance, you can only case a well in a certain way, or that whenever we stimulate a reservoir, certain things happen, or that power conversion can only happen a certain way. So I think making sure that if you are in the geothermal industry, that you educate yourself on the industry as a whole and not just in the specific field in which you're in, I think is a really good, just general piece of advice, because there is a lot happening, particularly these past couple of years. And I think those of you that went to GRC a couple of weeks ago will have seen there are all these different technical sessions where you can go in and learn about how AI is being deployed to figure out, how to predict where the subsurface has the sort of optimal conditions for whatever you're doing, and a lot of other things. And I think there's so many ways that you can educate yourself within the field of geothermal, but outside of what you do every day. And I think that's a really good, particularly these years right now, is a really good time to do that.
Yeah, well-roundedness for sure. So given that, what do you think is one of or the most impactful ways that people can invest in their own personal development, and then that how that can help you drive their career goals.
Um, I can give you an example of something that I did myself, which I actually didn't really fully tie to personal development or career goals, but turned out to be really useful. So 2 years ago, I signed up for improv comedy classes. And you all may think, improv comedy, what does that have to do with anything related to this? But I think it's interesting when you push yourself. I'm, as I said, engineer by background. I'm not particularly extrovert um, or a great communicator. I think when you force yourself to do something that does not does not come natural to you, that can be a really, really impactful way of developing yourself, even well after you are sort of left college or whatever you did, and you're out in industry. I learned so much about listening to others, picking up what's relevant in a conversation, um, thinking on the spot and speaking on the spot. This is really interesting for an engineer, and most of you are probably in this category. Uh, the worst thing we can think of is to speak before we have thought it through. What if it's something stupid? Like, I don't want to say something stupid, that would reflect poorly on me. So this idea of an improv comedy example of what really forces you to do that, to be willing to speak before you have thought it through and be willing to be wrong and say something stupid is actually really, really useful. And this idea of building on other people's ideas, there is no failure is a gift. We use it and build on it and build something new and better. Um, Public speaking, having an audience that you need to make sure that they actually are following you, right? Like it's otherwise it becomes a monologue. And I think I was way too far in the, well, I'm an engineer, I'm just gonna say what I need to say and hopefully they'll pick it up. But I wasn't really actually stopping and listening. Like, is this even relevant to people, right? Which arguably on a Zoom call is much harder. But that's, I think, an example of something out of the blue that has been really, really useful. I think there's also something that I at least have enjoyed doing is the idea of giving back. Like you are trying to help other people learn something or help them do something, because by, even if you have learned something, you learn much more about it if you are helping others learn it. Think about those that were, TAs in college or, these type of things. It's you may think that you know a subject and you might have done well on the test, but when you sit with somebody who is a year or two behind you and work with them on it, that's incredibly rewarding in terms of making sure that you really thoroughly understand what's going on and you pick up those holes in your knowledge. You're like, hang on, I actually don't know exactly why this is. I think this is why. Let me go look that up. So the helping others, giving back. Don't jump too quickly into, I want to be a consultant and charge you for my time. I know it's tempting sometimes, but be willing to help people pro bono has been really, really, really rewarding for me. And it gives you the choice of how much you do also, compared to being a consultant where it's like, now I have deliverables, I have to do these many hours or whatever, right? So that's also a really good one. Yeah, let's pause there perhaps.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying too is that there is a huge value in being a mentor. I feel like people always give the advice to young professionals that you should be looking for a mentor, and I think that's incredibly valuable advice. But I think exactly what you just said, where you also learn by teaching, and maybe others come up with the questions that you can't think of, and so providing mentorship also maybe it's a two-way street. So. And it also sounds like the relationships that you've built have been crucial for building your career as an investor and driving what technologies you want to invest in and what to look out for. So given that, can you recommend any strategies for how to build
So,
really valuable professional relationships?
Yeah. Yeah, this thing about mentors and having people around you that are helping you. It's interesting when I co-founded my company in San Francisco, again, software company, so different field. My co-founder was really, really good at that part. And so the way we did it was I was the founding CTO because I had learned how to code, and Rebecca, my co-founder, was the CEO. She had two engineering degrees from MIT, so not by any means not technical, but she was a mastermind at playing the social game and the sort of fundraising, community, external role. So we divided and conquered. And what Rebecca did very, very well, that I picked up a lot from, is that she would have all these people around her that she would help with stuff. So back to this thing about giving back, she would do favors for them. She would, help them look stuff up or make an intro to somebody who'd be of value, very proactively. So not wait until people ask you, but think about like, how can I help this person? So she stored all this social capital in all of these people around her. And then the minute we needed it for something, she would snap her fingers and cash it all in. And we would have like 50 people that would help us pull something off, like some amazing thing we had to do with the company, right? And it was just like, it took me a while to understand how that worked and to respect this choice of being so proactive and giving back to the community and sort of, and I know it sounds a little transactional, this thing about cashing in on it, but for me, next to her, that's really what it felt like. It was like, wow, you made friends with all these people so that right now when you need it, they can like pull everything together. It's really remarkable. And I think that just goes back to the, giving back can be a really effective way of moving yourself forward. And if I think about the different transitions I have done in my career, again, coming from biotech engineering into software in San Francisco, into women's health investments, and now geothermal energy, like this is not, no one could have seen this coming. Absolutely not. I had no idea that these things would happen. But when I think about each of those transitions, I can see that there's somebody who was doing me a favor, giving me an opportunity. And that didn't come out of the blue. Of course, there's a bit of luck, but there's also the fact that I have been helping a lot of other people. So it's a very interesting, you have to be open to those opportunities and you have to be a bit lucky, but there's definitely an element of seeding the ground for those opportunities pop up by being a good member of your community and of the ecosystem. That, at least in my case, has been very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's really great. It sounds like the relationships that you build throughout your career are really just crucial with driving you forward, but there's just as much importance as helping others get ahead too. So I really like that message there. Well, with that, I think it's about time to move into some breakout rooms and start our virtual networking portion of the webinar. So I think maybe automatically we'll get broken up. There we go. So if you're getting a pop-up right now, just go ahead and click join.